Hi, I'm Joshua Jerome, and today I want to share why I do history. My interest started with my family and their stories, but it's grown into something bigger. One of the events that shaped me most is the West Virginia Mine Wars, something many people don't even know happened, even though it was one of the biggest labor struggles in American history. So, my grandpa was the one who really sparked my love for history. We'd watch documentaries together and we would talk through them, and he would almost narrate and fill in the gaps that I wasn't understanding. Listening to him was one of my favorite things to do growing up. He had a way of talking about history that I just understood, and I could just focus in, and I knew what was being told to me, and it just seemed to make sense in a different way than any way I'd ever learned history before. He also told me stories about the mine wars and the history of our community. It always felt like he was letting me in on a secret because so many people where I grew up either didn't know the history or didn't have time to really think about it. In a place where life was mostly about getting by, those stories often disappeared once the people who were living them were gone. That's what made me realize how important it is to preserve history. My grandpa, he used history as a almost a crutch in each conversation. He referred back to it all the time. So I've almost took the same way of speaking, the way of looking at history, the way he does. So one of the biggest stories he would talk about just was the mine wars and the Battle of Blair Mountain. So the biggest part of the mine wars was the Battle of Blair Mountain. In 1921, around 10,000 miners marched into Logan County, demanding safer conditions and the right to unionize. The coal companies fought back with hired militias, and they even used private planes to drop bombs on the miners. And as a kid, when I was being told this, I had no belief that that could have even been possible, that this was a thing that could happen in our state or our country. And he would tell me about the times that his grandparents and his uncles would take him to these places that were supposedly where trenches were dug and where um, craters were from the bombs being dropped, and how his family had hideouts for guns that were dug out into the mountain. It was a really big part of his history, so it really felt like it was a big part of mine. So it became the largest armed labor uprising in U.S. history. Federal troops were eventually called in to end the fighting, even though the miners didn't win right away. Their struggle set the stage for labor rights that came later, especially during the New Deal. To me, this story shows just how far working people were willing to go to fight for dignity and how powerful interests pushed back to keep control. So, this is a big part of why I do history, because stories like these often go untold. If they aren't preserved, they're forgotten. I don't just want to know what happened, I want to know why it happened. The mine wars weren't just about one strike or one battle, they were about company control, unsafe working conditions, and people standing up for their rights. And that's what I enjoy about history, is moving past the simple version of events and uncovering the deeper causes. And I respect the boldness and the factual side of history, the patterns it reveals when you look close. And that's something that I try to pass on into my classroom to students, is to let them know that it's not as cut and dry as sometimes it's made out to be, or as an assignment makes it feel, because there is a deeper side, and there is a really specific reason certain things happen and the way things fall. And with the Mine Wars story that my grandpa told me, and how it connected to me, and how I wanted to know more and why and who and all of these things, I want to be able to do that in the classroom with my students and give them that story that they want to go into the future with, and shape the way they build their ideas and how they look for information. So, looking ahead, I see history as something I'll use not only in teaching but also in leadership and in life. I love studying people and the patterns that connect events across time. For me, history isn't just about memorizing the facts, it's also about learning how to think critically and use the past to make sense of the present. So, I guess to close it out, why do I do history? It's because it connects where I'm from to something much larger. The Mine Wars are part of West Virginia's story, but it's also part of the America's story. I do history to keep those stories alive, to dig into facts, and to help people to see the bigger picture of why things happened the way they did. And that's what really drives me as a historian as I go forward in my career.